provoked the most important philosophical question of all time. Where do we humans on this tiny planet fit into such a grand scheme of things? Evidence from cave paintings and from mythology suggests that Paleolithic man already had an instinct of a deep and inextricable connection with the external cosmos. This extended through historical times and in diverse cultures throughout the world. Around 400 BC, Metrodorus of Chios said, "It is unnatural in a large field to have only one shaft of wheat, and in an infinite universe, only one living world." Then later on in 50 BC, Lucretius said, "Nothing in the universe is unique and alone, and therefore on other planets there must be other Earths inhabited by different tribes of men and breeds of beasts." Then in 1600 AD, the very famous episode of Giordano Bruno, who declared that there must be an infinite number of suns and planets and life around them. On the Indian subcontinent, Buddhist cosmology derived from Vedic and Hindu traditions followed the same trend, with one particular text declaring the following: "As far as these suns and moons revolve, shedding their light in space, so far extends the thousand-fold world system. In it there are 1,000 suns, 1,000 moons, 1,000 inhabited earths, and 1,000 heavenly bodies. This is called the thousand-fold minor world system." And that's just one description that essentially puts our Earth in the context of a much bigger universe. In the West, the ideas about life that dominated philosophy and science came mainly from classical Greece and Rome of the 5th century, 5th to 3rd century BC. For Aristotle, life was confined to the earth and arose spontaneously on the earth. It is said that a mixture of warm earth and morning dew led to fireflies twinkling like stars in the night sky. Today, modern science understands how fireflies light up, of course, using a chemical called luciferase. But the origin of life remains an unsolved problem, as indeed the question of whether intelligent life is a unique, rare, or common occurrence in the universe. Now I want to talk a little bit about the molecular complexity of life, which is actually super astronomical. The mind-blowing complexity of life at a molecular and cellular level holds a clue, I believe, to its origins, to the origins of life. For the simplest prokaryotic cell, the specific molecular arrangements needed to achieve even the basic logic and functioning of a cell is super astronomical. A single gram of E. coli could hold up to nearly 900,000 gigabytes or 900 terabytes of data in the form of DNA, meaning that these bacteria have almost 500 times the storage capacity of a top line of commercial hard drive on a computer. In a Royal Astronomical Society lecture delivered in Cardiff on the 15th of April 1980, my collaborator Fred Hoyle said precisely this: "In retrospect, I find it remarkable that microbiologists did not at once recognize that the world into which they had penetrated had of necessity to be of cosmic order. I suspect that the cosmic quality of microbiology will seem as obvious to future generations as the sun being the center of our solar system is obvious to the present generation." The alternative to a terrestrial origin of life, to a purely Earth-based origin of life, against incredible odds, is the concept of panspermia. Life's origins being a one-off event and delivery of life in primitive forms to planets occurring by the agency of comets. The basic idea of panspermia is not new, but is now gaining ground, and it has had a very long history. Panspermia goes back in the Western world into classical Greece to Anaxagoras in the 5th century BC, who proposed that living seeds or spermata were distributed throughout the cosmos. Even much earlier, in the Vedic traditions of ancient India, around 2500 BC or earlier, the idea of life being a cosmic phenomenon, cosmic attribute, was widely prevalent. The logic of panspermia follows from two unarguable facts. The first is a discovery by Louis Pasteur in 1870 that microbial life is always derived from pre-existing microbial life. He showed, for instance, that processes such as the fermentation of wine and the souring of milk could not occur and did not occur in the absence of pre-existing microbes. And the second is the ability of microbes to survive the harshest imaginable conditions, the conditions that prevail in space. And this has only recently been documented to a huge extent in various ways. I shall argue in this lecture that the first transformation of non-living inorganic chemicals to life could not have taken place on the Earth, so our attention must be turned to bigger and bigger cosmic settings. From the Earth, we can move on to something like 100 billion comets that surrounds the whole solar system. Then we can move on to the Milky Way, to 100, 200 billion stars, to a local group of galaxies, and to a local supercluster, and ultimately to the entire universe. In June of this year, 2015, the oldest galaxy that is known so far has been discovered, and it's called CR7, and this is supposed to have formed just 800 million years after a presumed Big Bang origin of the whole universe. And all the chemical elements needed for life are already in place in this object, which is some 800 million years post-Big Bang. In a 13.8 to 14 billion year old Big Bang universe, if you believed in that model, the most favorable location for the origin of life is in objects like the CR object that was CR7 that was discovered a few months ago, which would have formed, this galaxy would have formed when the universe was highly compact. And this point here, somewhere about marked by the yellow arrow. Thereafter, once life started, once life originated, in whatever form, either by random processes or by an intelligent action or a creation of some kind, you do not need to do that again. It spreads inexorably within frozen objects like comets as the universe itself expands. But we should remember that the Big Bang theory that is so prevalent these days is not sacrosanct. There are many alternatives. For instance, the universe could be accelerating and then decelerating into a big crunch. Then it could go on accelerating at an increasing rate and go into a big freeze and so on. So there are many possibilities that are still open. And for instance, there are also non-conformist, non-standard cosmological models like those have been discussed by Turok and Penrose of an oscillating universe, cyclic or quasi-steady-state universe. And it's interesting to note that these creation-destruction types of universes, this creation-destruction cycle, accords well with Hindu cosmologies. And it is said that a day and night of Brahma, for instance, involves a single cycle of some 8.64 billion years in length. But whatever the cosmology that might eventually turn out to be true, our focus, my focus in this talk would be on a unique origin of life, and panspermia being the route by which life arrived on the Earth at the first moment that it could survive, which was 3.9 to 4 billion years ago. And I should tell you that this last week, there has been a discovery that's quite an amazing discovery of very ancient sediments, rocks that were formed 4.1 billion years ago, and evidence of life in the form of enhancement of carbon-13 has been published recently, this a couple of days ago. So life has actually started. There's no question that life started on the Earth at the very, very first moment that it could survive, and at a time when we know for sure that the Earth was being pounded by comet impacts. So once life starts in the universe, once it gets spread around into galaxies and so on, a cosmic cycle of life develops. You have the primordial cosmological microbes going into galaxies, going into regions where stars form, like these huge clouds of gas and dust that are present in our galaxy. So stars and planets and comets form. They are then returned, these amplified bacterial cells are returned back into the interstellar space in medium, and this cycle continues. As we shall see, this initial legacy of cosmic life is continuously amplified within warm liquid interiors of comets. A fraction of microbes that are amplified in comets find their way into the interstellar dust clouds. And these are clouds that are everywhere in the Milky Way. If you see, look at the Milky Way, it's arches across the sky, and the dark patches and striations are clouds of these interstellar dust particles. Astronomical evidence for the biogenicity, the organic structures, organic nature of the interstellar dust has grown steadily since about 1978. This is the first comparison of a set of data points. The points are observations of infrared flux from 3 to 4 micrometers or 2 to 4 micrometers of a very distant source, and it's essentially charting the behavior of dust all the way from the source to the Earth. And the match is between the predictions from a bacterium, a dry bacterium, a desiccated bacterium, and the absorption in this astronomical source. It implies that one carbon atom in every 3 in interstellar space is in the form of an organic structure that you cannot spectroscopically distinguish from a bacterium. And there are more and more data of this kind that has come through astronomy, through various observational techniques over the years. This is another observation where the extinction of starlight matches the properties of a biological ensemble. This is a galaxy that is again very far away, at 8 billion light years away, and those bumps that you see there essentially are aromatic, biological type aromatic molecules absorbing starlight in these very distant galaxies. So and still another example, and the universe was just something like 2 billion years old, according to Big Bang cosmology, when light from this galaxy was emitted, and it shows signs of infrared bands corresponding to biological material. The more infrared spectroscopy has been around for quite a while now. A whole series of absorption bands, 3.3, 6.2, 6.7, and so on. These bands correspond to aromatic, biologically relevant aromatic molecules. And the strengths of the bands essentially show that a considerable fraction of all the carbon in the universe is tied up in these systems, in these emitters that are very similar to bacteria. In 2015, evidence for the biogenicity of relevant molecules are found everywhere, from planets in the solar system to the interstellar clouds to the most distant galaxies, all pointing clearly to life being a cosmic phenomenon. Let me next discuss briefly some modern astronomical evidence that confirms comets to be carrying life, confirms existence of life-bearing comets. And this evidence for organic molecules started in 1986 when there was the last perihelion passage of Comet Halley, and we measured the our colleagues and I measured the infrared spectrum of this comet, and for the first time we had an organic material in the comet, which is the points there in that curve on the right are the observations from Comet Halley, and the curve is the prediction from a bacterium, from a desiccated bacterium. And in 1995, Comet Hale-Bopp came along, the very famous Comet Hale-Bopp, many people have seen, and very strongly visible comet, and showed huge activity, lots of gas and dust spewing out when the comet was at 6 astronomical units, which is 6 times the Earth's distance from the Sun, way beyond the orbit of Jupiter, and when it was in the cold depths of space. So you wouldn't expect the normal models of comets, the old model of comets, to do anything, but this was expected of an organic comet. The organic comet model predicts that biological activity produced high pressures of gas, pockets of gas inside just underneath the crust, a frozen crust. Frozen crust then breaks up like sort of a bottle of champagne breaking or cork popping up, and you get the cometary activity. Hale-Bopp also had a spectrum that was measured, which matched the spectrum of a mixture of silicates and biomaterial. And only 10% of the material of this comet, Hale-Bopp, needed to be inorganic. The rest was all organic, similar to biomaterial. Then came another mission to a comet called the Deep Impact Mission on July the 4th, 2005, when a huge impactor slammed into this comet, Tempel 1, and ruptured its crust. And the stuff that came out from it had a spectrum that is shown on top there, and that spectrum also measures the spectrum of organic material. Then more recently, we had the studies of from the comet 67P CG, as it's called for short, from the Rosetta, from the European Space Agency's Rosetta mission, and this has also shown tantalizing signs, both of liquid water underneath the crust, warm liquid water underneath the crust, and occasional rupturing of the crust. So the crust sort of cracking open, and you can see the relic of the cracks there in that sort of resealed sort of zigzag line there. And this is essentially consistent with a biological eruption. And then you have also a spectrum of the comet, reflectivity spectrum of the comet that matches the spectrum of an organic, similar to biomaterial, and a comet itself spewing out water, organics in very large quantities all over the place. This brings it right up to date. In October, this is a couple of weeks ago, a French group of radioastronomers reported the discovery of a profuse emission of methyl alcohol and a sugar. Glycolaldehyde is a sugar from the tail of a comet called Comet Lovejoy, clearly pointing to fermentation in my view. I don't think any other explanation is viable except that there is biological activity underneath the crust of this comet, and the crust ruptures, and amongst the stuff that spews out, you get alcohol that you can in fact drink. It's methyl alcohol, and which is a fermentation product of biology, and the sugar. Recently also, there was a NASA's Cassini mission to Saturn's moon, Enceladus, and that also showed evidence of a liquid water ocean below the frozen icy crust. Huge liquid water ocean right through the whole moon of Saturn, and rupturing of the crust, very similar to the behavior of the comets. So both Enceladus and Comet 67P CG show clear signs, in my view, of microbial activity. Let me next change gear a little bit and talk about viruses and evolution. So far, I've discussed only bacteria as possible cellular invaders of our planet. New data from gene sequencing show that viruses are overwhelmingly more dominant and important in the scheme of things. some 10 million viruses have recently been counted in a single drop of ocean water. If you take one drop of ocean water, you can count about 10 million viruses. And there are an estimated 10 to the 31, 10 raised to the 31 DNA viruses on the Earth altogether. So we conclude that since these viruses degrade on a very short time scale, they can't last there forever on the surface, they must be falling from space. They must be continually being supplied to the oceans maybe from the rain. Fred Hoyle and I argued for many years that evolution of higher life forms and the emergence of intelligence depends critically on this input of viral information. So we have the idea is that there's a cosmic cloud of viruses containing genetic material, programs essentially for all life, and these then are exchanged between the Earth and back into space. And that's the kind of relationship that we have between viruses and a planet like the Earth. So any species or life form that developed total immunity from viruses, excluding viruses, they will then on this basis cease to evolve, because viruses, we think, contain the evolutionary potential, the main evolutionary potential for life. These ideas were exceedingly controversial in 1980, but are now more or less being vindicated in various ways. So these are the books that we had, Evolution in Space, Virus in Space, and the book that one should look at now is one by Frank Ryan, in which he develops this idea of the human genome being recently invaded by viruses that were responsible essentially for the development of Homo sapiens. So human genome contains over 10% or so of sequences that are ultimately derived from viruses, and that interacted genetically with the evolving hominid species and directed its evolution, including, according to Ryan, including the development of brain function. So I've said that some 40% of the human genome is made of viral sequences, and these viruses were inserted into our ancestral line through devastating pandemics of disease. So you could see the whole sequence of chimpanzees to humans, intelligent humans, essentially being punctuated by invasions from viruses that supplied the genes that were needed for major evolutionary developments. So the evolutionary tree can be marked at several points at the places where these pandemics of external viruses took place and where the genes were inserted. This is a sequence of human brain size suddenly doubling in its volume around 500,000 years ago. The next topic I want to discuss briefly is the search for habitable planets, which is a very hot topic now. And there's been very, very recent work that's been extremely interesting. Our solar system cannot be unique in having a planet or planets that are congenial for life. For a main sequence star, a star like the Sun, the range of distances of planets that can be habitable depends on temperature. Essentially, the temperature has to be between the freezing point of water and the boiling point of water, and that's the planet in the middle there. The green zone is just right and corresponds to distances where liquid water can exist. So the question is, how many such planets are there in our galaxy? Finding a fully-fledged planet is not an easy matter because stars outshine the reflected light from a planet by many powers of 10. If you imagine a sun-like star and a planet going around it, you can see the planet only by its reflected light, and the reflected light is trivial compared to the light of the sun. So you cannot hope to see any planet for a star that is more than a few light years away. So you need to have a different technique, and the technique that has been very successful and from which the majority of exoplanets in the past 5 years have been detected is called the transit method, where you basically measure the change in brightness of a star as a planet goes in front of it. So you can see here the star going in front, and the planet going in front, and so the intensity of the starlight dips by a few percent, some 1 or 2%, but that's measurable by modern techniques, and the satellite that is doing this with great energy and extreme productivity currently is called the Kepler satellite, and the Kepler satellite has already discovered 2,000 confirmed positive detections of habitable planets. The satellite has been launched only in 2009. So in 6 years, there's been this huge harvest of new planetary detections. And from this small number of detections, from this sampling, it's a small sampling of the galaxy that's been done, you could extrapolate to the whole galaxy. And this has been done by many people, and the extrapolation from the sampling that the Kepler mission achieved leads to a total of 140 billion habitable planets in our galaxy. It's a huge number. When you think of the number of sun-like stars in the galaxy, which is only 200 billion, it's almost for every sun-like star, you have a planetary system like ours. So it's quite an amazing find that has recently been realized. And if you then work out the average distance between these habitable planets that are going around other stars, the distance turns out to be only 4 light years, right? There's so many of these that the distance between the two habitable planetary systems is only 4 light years. So between such planetary systems, it's inevitable that you're going to exchange material, comets, dust, and so on. And so this makes panspermia almost a foregone conclusion. Comets can disperse life to planets within a single planetary system and also between adjacent planetary systems. This is a comet that is going around the sun and just essentially spewing out the dust from the interior, like we saw in the various comets that have been studied recently. So one could ask the question, can you devise a test in modern times to see whether microbes are actually entering the Earth at the present time? In a startling new discovery in October 2015, I think I mentioned this briefly at the beginning, it's been found that zirconium crystals that formed 4.1 billion years ago contain carbon nodules with isotopic signatures of life. So the carbon isotopes, carbon-12 and carbon-13, occur in a certain ratio on the Earth, and biology, life prefers to take up the lighter isotope. So when you have a sort of fossilized system, life has actually been operating on the Earth for a while, you get deposits of carbon which are rich in carbon, the lighter isotope, carbon-12, and this has been detected in the recent zirconium crystals. The top is this is delta carbon-13, that's E. coli, and these are the top marks here, the triangles, blue triangles, are the carbon inclusions in zirconium crystals that were formed at a time when the Earth was being severely pounded by impact. So this puts the beginning of life on the Earth at a time when the Earth was in the midst of an episode of fierce impacts from comets, proving beyond doubt, in my view, that comets delivered the first life to Earth 4.1 billion years ago. There's not a shred of evidence now for any primordial soup to have brewed on the Earth. So if comets brought first life to the Earth 4.1 billion years ago, that process cannot stop because comets, as I said, are still going around the sun. They're going, throwing out organic material, throwing out bacteria possibly, and so on. So could we verify this? Search for extraterrestrial, this is not what I wanted. Okay, cyanobacteria, diatoms are examples of fossils that have been found in meteorites. They're still sort of argued about, but they're certainly there. And there's also evidence of microbial material coming in from the Earth's upper atmosphere. But I won't go into that in any great detail, but I want to move on to another exciting topic, the topic that has captured headlines recently, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. On an alien planet lying within the habitable zone of a sun-like star, the same genes, there are viruses and bacteria maybe, that led to the evolution of life on Earth, would also have been incident on these other planets from similar mechanism by comets hitting them. So could we, so it is implicit in these ideas of panspermia and of the process of cosmic gene transfer, gene assembly that led to humans on this planet, that intelligent life will also be common on other planets, on these other many 140 billion planets that have been discovered. The level of intelligence and technology on an alien planet could span a wide range, and at the upper end could far exceed the level of intelligence and technology associated with humans. So, where are they? If this is the case, well, we should ask the question, where are they and how could we find them? Listening in with arrays of radio telescopes has been the method of choice for a long time and still continues to the present day to be an activity engaged by organizations like SETI, but unfortunately there's no positive result that one could boast about. In 2015, this present year, a Russian tycoon called Yuri Milner has injected a vast sum of money, $100 million, into the SETI projects worldwide and based mostly at Parkes telescope in Australia, but also in the United States. And the hope is that by putting more money into SETI, you might improve the chances of a positive detection. That's not always the case. Putting money doesn't really lead inevitably to the results that you desire. Anyway, that's been done and that's been promised at least these couple of months ago. One particular variant of the SETI program is to target confirmed exoplanets. I told you that these exoplanets were discovered by the Kepler satellite, so you have these points in the sky, so you beam things, beam signals to them, or point your antennae to these particular objects, planetary systems, to see whether you can get any information back. Alternatively, it's also been suggested that you can send modulated laser beams to these external planetary systems, for example, transmitting the entire store of human knowledge, human technological and artistic and musical knowledge to other planets, which also might potentially have life on them. While radio telescopes are being tuned to find evidence of alien intelligence, the Kepler satellite that has found these several thousand planetary systems may have inadvertently made a major discovery in these last few days of an advanced civilization. This is a star called KIC 8462852, located 1,480 light years away from us. And what they did was to use the transit method, and what was found was this kind of obscuration of the parent star, but the obscuration was not now, in this case, not 1 or 2%, but was 20% obscuration, and it occurred regularly. So I want to get a picture of this. Oh, that's the location of the star, and I think I'm missing one of the animations. Anyway, what they found is that there's huge obscuration peaks of the star, and the idea is that this is due to a megastructure that has been constructed by an advanced civilization, perhaps 1,000 or 2,000 years ahead of us. Just imagine if you're running out of energy sources on the Earth. We've run out of all the oil and the coal. We've run out of nuclear resources. The next thing we would do would be, perhaps, to try to harness the entire energy of our dying sun. And to do that, you'd have to put lots of structures around the sun and use devices to direct the energy to us. And this has been talked about in various ways, so almost fictionally, but now there is possible evidence for a civilization that is way ahead of us around this nearby star. To end my talk, I want to just talk very briefly to social resistance that exists to ideas of life existing outside of the Earth. So I would like to discuss this question very briefly. Why, and to ask the question, why, despite overwhelming evidence, as we have seen, is the concept of cosmic life being resisted in some circles? The answer must be culture, religion, innate scientific conservatism. After all, we are all highly conservative animals. We don't like to change anything in our way of life. We don't like to change a house, for instance, or our wives or husbands. So there's been an ingrained attitude of humans to stick to what they've got. And there's also the possibility that a long overdue paradigm shift from Earth-centered to cosmic-centered life can be seen as an extension of the Copernican revolution, which started nearly half a millennium ago. And that's the only way one should really see this new development of cosmic life. Accomplishing the first Copernican revolution was a long and painful struggle. It needed Copernicus, Galileo, and finally Newton, and this whole process took 150 years. And at the end of this, the Earth was demoted from its physical centrality in the cosmos, but removing our planet from a presumed center of life took another 250 years, or maybe a little more. Today, an extension of this same Copernican revolution may be stalled for some other reasons, for apparently rational reasons. Admission of extraterrestrial life might be perceived as a threat to national security. People may become so scared and emotionally so unsettled that even the enforcement of law and order might pose a problem. To admit that we had supported a wrong paradigm for so long may also have economic repercussions in regard to large funding commitments already in place, for example, for exploring ideas based on a totally wrong premise. Perhaps the worst casualty of all will be our self-image as the supreme life form in the cosmos, which will be shattered and require major efforts in psychological and educational readjustment. It is likely that the entire structure of human society will undergo a transformation more fundamental and profound than any that has taken place so far. Over tens of thousands of years, the smallest unit to which loyalty is owed has expanded from the nuclear family to the extended family to the small tribe, as in this Neolithic site here, to the city-state, to the nation-state, and eventually to all humanity, and to some extent to all life that shares our biosphere. I would like to conclude with this, I think, highly relevant quotation from Rabindranath Tagore: "The same stream of life that runs through my veins night and day runs through the world and dances in rhythmic measures." It is the same life that shoots in joy through dust of the earth in numberless blades of grass and breaks into tumultuous waves of leaves and flowers. Okay, that's the end of my talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Wikramasinghe, for a beautiful presentation, bringing the cosmology, the virology, the biology, planetology, and the sociology finally in this forum. Now the forum is open for one or two questions.
Presentation,
Yes.
I collected that, I understood that you are saying life is from the other planets.
Yes.
But I am asking how the first life in that planet, from where it may be.
From where it came, maybe. That I do not answer. I think the first life had been an exceedingly, the transformation from non-life to life is so exceedingly improbable that first and foremost it could not have happened on a small planet. I think that's out of the question. Evidence also is really, really powerful for that now, with the discovery that there's signs of life in rocks that were formed 4.1 billion years ago, right? Up to last year, there was maybe from 3.8 billion years was thought to be the oldest life, and there was an uncomfortable 1 billion sort of small period of time when a primordial soup may have operated, but now there's no chance at all. So life came from outside, life came from a much bigger system. The complexity of life, the molecular complexity of life is so immense that it could not have happened on a single planet. It was a one-off transformation that happened on a cosmological scale, but apart from that, I don't know. Maybe it was God.
I want to.
Mr. Wikramasinghe, it's a wonderful talk. I just was looking at the experimental work which was done. If you see the life from the molecular actual perspective, so you have certain like inorganic kind of molecules, and then some organic molecules or monomers, and you have some biopolymers,
Yes.
and then you can bring the cell hierarchical levels actually. So the kind of evidence you are getting from the other galaxies and kind of things, they are at the level of like some aromatic compounds. I mean, are they like? Can you call them biomonomer kind of things, or?
Well, they're not biomonomers, they're biopolymers would be the explanation that I would have. But there are two possibilities. One is that there are steps towards life, right? That you're seeing in these very complex polymers and these spectral features that I showed you, that they are steps towards an origin of life. But when you look at the complexity of it's not in the complexity of individual molecules that life is the essential thing about life is that it is incredibly complex in its specific informational structure and what's called Shannon information, isn't it? The Shannon probability. So it's a very specific set of arrangements that are needed to emerge from some unknown principle of physics. If there is some unknown property of matter that directs inorganic systems towards living systems, that's fine. But so far we have not found any such fundamental property of matter, isn't it?
No, I am referring to those peaks, actually absorption peaks.
Yeah.
So what kind of molecule they indicate actually?
Well, the peaks in the infrared are a mixture of polyaromatic hydrocarbons made in various different ways. I mean, people have synthesized this conventional astrophysicists have tried to synthesize, done laboratory work and synthesize mixtures of
Hydrocarbons.
Pardon?
Hydrocarbons.
Hydrocarbons, yeah. But it's not very successful. The much better fits are obtained if you take biological pigments. That's my conclusion. So the other problem with the inorganic abiotic process is to try to defend how you could get such a huge transformation of inorganic matter into prebiotic matter taking place on a vast galactic scale. Because in the galaxy you need something like 10% of the carbon in that form, in the form that is essentially indistinguishable from biomaterial. So my interpretation would be that these are the primordial microbial cells, bacteria, viruses, bits of bacteria and so on, that have been just exchanged, thrown around the cosmos, and are continuously being chewed up, broken up, burnt up by proximity to starlight and so on. So it's either, so there are two routes. One is to say that they're the breakup products of biology, or that they are the inexorable route towards biology, that inorganic materials always finds a way to...
so essentially you are basically this information, you are making it in a cosmic level.
The information
transfer.
The Shannon information that is needed, which is a huge information, right? And I think I don't know whether I stressed it enough, but it's information that people have just not, you can't even begin to think of how you can generate that information. So that information has to be there, and whether that is done, whether that information is obtained inorganically, not inorganically, with mechanistically or through action of intelligence, I don't know. I think one has to beg answer to the question. Alternatively, if the universe has an infinite age, right? And that's another matter, because I think we all think now as the Big Bang is proven, and it's not true at all, because you're getting more and more problems with very old galaxies, like the galaxy that I showed you, the CR7, which is a galaxy that is supposedly a modern galaxy. It has star formation taking place, it has carbon, nitrogen, oxygen all in place, and this is in so-called dark ages of cosmology. And so we are getting into a region of cosmology where the whole sort of framework of Big Bang cosmology is being challenged, and there may be something that will emerge. I think if you go back in time, at every moment in the history of cosmology, people thought that they had the final answer, isn't it, to how the universe began. And at every moment, every point, they were shown to be wrong. So it's not, to me, it's not clear that some of the Neil Turok and Roger Penrose ideas of an oscillating universe may be much better. And if information can survive the cusps, right, then it doesn't need to have an origin at all. It could be part of the nature of the universe. Life could be part of the nature. Could be part of the universe itself.
This one actually, it resembles this description of Brahma's days, actually.
Isn't it? Creation,
because somewhere the seed remains, but the rest of the place it is there.
Yeah. It's very well. I mean,
another like curiosity I have from like little simple physics perspective. What kind of physical environment? I mean, I'm not familiar with what the molecular biologists are thinking. What is the line of thought? But what kind of environment they think as like nucleated? Because like like temperature, pressure is one thing, or is there any possibility of there is some very high magnetic field or electric field somewhere which is kind of
You have to, I think the environment has to have the information, isn't it? The information is the information that is. Okay.
What about is there any similarity with the old Urey-Miller experiment, the glow discharge? They created the molecules.
The Urey-Miller experiment created the amino acids and the nucleotides. That was not a big deal, right? In those days, in 1940s, 50s, people thought that making organic molecules was a problem, that only life could make organic molecules. And so this was a major breakthrough that Urey-Miller achieved. And from that breakthrough, it was wrongly assumed that they came very close to understanding the origin of life, because the origin of life is not the formation of the molecules, but the formation of the macromolecules in very particular orders. Right? But the Urey-Miller experiment has been extended by lots of groups currently working mostly in California. There are several groups trying to make sort of bubbles of organics and so on, and irradiate it, and nothing has really happened. Except the nearest creation of life experiment was of the guy who took an E. coli, a bacterium, stripped it of its DNA, and inserted other nucleotides, and he made a new bacterium. But the whole apparatus for the bacterium is already there, so you just change the DNA artificially. That's not a big deal, I think, compared with the ultimate origin.
Professor Vikramasinghe, once long time
Dr.
back
Ghosh,
we had
Dr.
one
Ghosh, we have to
discussion.
cut short
Yes.
the discussion.
And you made a
We have
very...
another speaker. We have another speaker, Dr.
Oh, achha, achha.
Varun.
Just one. Achha, okay, okay, okay. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wikramasinghe. We had several questions. I have several questions in mind, but I think the time is not ripe. Dr. Barun is waiting, our third speaker. So we have to give some space and time to him. He is well known to this audience. He is the director of the Bhaktivedanta Institute. After doing his aerospace engineering from IIT Kanpur, he joined the Bhaktivedanta Institute, and since then he is in various positions, and today he is holding the post of the director. Dr. Barun.